Hello, this is Coding Gicha for full stack developers. In the previous chapter, I covered how to set up a more convenient development environment on Windows, which is still used by many users, including general users. In this chapter, we will set up a web development environment on Windows in earnest. I will set up a web development environment by installing and setting up MariaDB and development languages such as Java, Deno. Most Linux distributions, including Ubuntu, can be used to install and configure development environments using commands in the terminal, but Windows requires the help of a GUI environment. Some tools do not have a set installation path, but I personally do not like them to be messily mixed with other directories, so I prefer to create a separate directory for managing development tools. I will manage them in the Tools directory. Tools that only have one executable file will be managed in the local /bin. In Windows, system-related executable files are managed in the Windows /system32 directory, but there is no separate directory for managing local executable files, so this is a path similar to the /usr/local/bin that manages local executable files in Linux. Since it is a path created directly, it must be registered in the path. Windows settings are supported by a graphical screen, but paradoxically, you may feel more difficult or complicated because you have to search through too many menus. You must add the /tools/local/bin directory to the path. I have already added it. MariaDB is an open-source RDBMS that was released to solve MySQL's uncertain license issue after MySQL was acquired by Oracle. To install MariaDB on Windows, you need to access the MariaDB site and download the installation file. When you go to the download screen, it will automatically recognize the client's operating system and provide the Windows installation file. I will download it as the default rolling version. I recommend installing the GA-stable version on the operating server. The rolling version is a development branch version that is continuously updated, so it reflects the latest development status before the official version is released, but stability is not guaranteed, so I recommend installing the GA version on the operating server. The Windows operating system is mainly used in the development environment, not the operating server, so I will install it as the default rolling version. Double-clicking the downloaded installation file in File Explorer will launch the installation wizard. Follow the instructions in the installation wizard. Since Windows has a somewhat poor CLI environment, there is a need for a GUI client program. HideSQL is a third-party tool, but it is provided together when installing MariaDB on Windows. I personally prefer Beekeeper Studio as a DB client in a GUI environment, so I will not use it, but I will install HideSQL with the default settings. I will set the password for the database user root. Although Windows has started supporting Unicode, it still uses a multi-byte character set, so the default setting is not UTF-8. When installing development tools on Windows, you should focus on whether there is an option to use UTF-8. I will install the rest with the default settings. Although I installed HiDSQL in the GUI environment, the default client that connects to the MariaDB server and executes SQL statements is MariaDB Monitor in the CLI environment. In order to run MariaDB Monitor, you need to add the path to the system environment variable. Let's run terminal. Let's run MariaDB Monitor. Since the CLI environment is light and fast, I often use MariaDB Monitor when checking simple SQL statements. However, if you are not familiar with the CLI environment, you can use HiDSQL that was installed together. Let's run HiDSQL. Let's create a new session. You can connect by entering a suitable session name, entering a password, and clicking the Open button. In a HIDPI high-resolution environment, there is a bug where the sidebar text is cut off at half the width. It's useful, but I personally recommend Beekeeper Studio as a GUI client. Let's install OpenJDK for Java development. There are various OpenJDKs, but on Windows, Microsoft Build Implementation or Azul's Zulu is usually installed. Personally, I recommend Azul's Zulu. OpenJDK implementations support the same functions, but strangely, there is a slight performance difference between OpenJDK implementations for Windows, and Azul's Zulu is a bit better than Microsoft Build implementation. It takes quite a long time to find the file to download, and I wonder why it takes so long. The latest LTS version of OpenJDK at the time of video editing is 21. OpenJDK 21 was recommended as a download, so I will download this version. You can also install Azul's Zulu through the installation wizard. During the installation process, you can set the Java home variable. Some applications implemented in Java or applications using Java require the Java home to be set in order to run, so you must set the Java home. Even if you did not set the Java home variable during the installation process, you can set the Java home directly in the system environment variables. The path to the Zulu's bin directory is automatically added to the path. For the system environment variables to be reflected, you must restart the programs that run Java. Let's close terminal and run it again. Let's check if the installation was successful by checking the Java version. Java is a language that requires compilation, so a project manager is required. Let's install Gradle. The basic installation of Gradle is through the package manager, but since Windows does not support it, we will download the binary compressed file directly and use it. You need to move the downloaded file to a suitable location and unzip it, but it may be faster and simpler to work in terminal. Let's go to the directory where tools are collected and managed. Let's move the downloaded file to the current location. Let's unzip it with a command built into PowerShell. A directory with the name of the compressed file will be created and the compressed file will be unzipped in it. A Gradle directory has been created again in the Gradle directory. Let's delete the unzipped directory and work again. If you don't want to create a directory in the compressed file name when unzipping with Expand Archive, you can specify the unzipping location. It's a bit complicated and takes a long time to unzip, so I'll use the unzip command I installed earlier. Unzip unzips the compressed directory structure only. And the unzipping time is also a bit faster. There may be preferences, but you can basically check the files that are unzipped. Since the compressed structure only is unzipped, you can use it as is without any additional work. I'll remove the compressed files that have finished working. In order to run Gradle, you need to add the path to the system environment variable. When you create a project with Gradle, Gradle W is included in the project local, so if you are a team member who uses the created project, you do not need to install Gradle. Gradle is used a lot, but if you do not create the project yourself, you do not need to install it. You can also create a new project without Gradle by changing some settings in the created project. These days, as project managers are widely used, build tools like Apache Ant are not used much, but Apache Ant has its own advantages, so I always install it. If you don't use Apache Ant, you can skip it. Apache Ant is not downloaded via a script, but rather the actual download address, so let's copy the address. If you work in terminal, you can download it directly to the location you want to work on with wget, which is more useful. Let's download Apache Ant from the tools directory with wget. Let's unzip it. Let's remove the compressed file after the work is done. Apache Ant also needs to add path to system environment variables. The runtime language for JavaScript has already established an ecosystem with Node.js, but it is becoming more and more distant from the standard ECMA script, so I personally recommend Deno. Deno is a relatively new tool, so it supports installation in terminal on Windows. Deno is a new runtime language created by Ryan Dahl, the original author of Node.js, to improve some of the non-modern methods of Node.js and the package management that relies on NPM, which caused the gap with the standard ECMA script as well as security issues regarding file input-output. Deno does not require adding path to system environment variables, and you can use Deno right away in the same session terminal where you installed it, not in a new session. I will also install Deno, which manages Deno as a daemon. The Deno upgrade command is a Deno reinstallation command, so you only need to add the R option to the installation command. These days, it is essential to service web applications with TLS security certificates. If you want to test by applying certificates in the development environment as in the operating server environment, I recommend MKCert. Of course, in a Windows environment, it is not easy to develop with PHP or to configure a web server in front of the web application and develop, so I wonder if MKCert is necessary. To install MKCert in Windows, you need to install it through a package manager called Chocolatey. However, since Windows does not have a basic package manager, it seems that many developers are reluctant to use it while installing a third-party tool. Since it also provides a pre-built binary, I will download MKCert to the /tools/local/bin directory, which collects and manages local executables. I will just copy the download address. Since it is an executable file, we will download it directly to the /tools/local/bin directory. To make the certificates generated by mkcert recognized as locally trusted certificates, you need to run the mkcert installer. You need to run it as administrator, but since I have sudo enabled, I can just add sudo in front of the command and run it. Let's create a certificate file. You can create a certificate file for localhost, but I prefer to develop similarly to the operating server environment by adding -dev to the actual operating domain, so I register the domain to be developed in the hosts file and use it. I have already registered the gicha.org domains in the previous chapter. Let's create a directory to manage certificates. Let's go to the created directory. If you create certificates with Let's Encrypt on the operating server, it is better to create certificates with the same file name. I will match the certificate file name of Let's Encrypt with the key file option and cert file option. mkcert can issue certificates for wildcard domains. Since the validity period is 2 years and 3 months, you can use it for almost all development without renewing or other tasks. If you do not set the chain.pem file with the root certificate authority signature, some browsers may not trust the public key certificate, so it is better to use full chain.pem rather than cert.pem as the public key when registering the certificate. The full chain.pem file is a certificate file that includes both cert.pem and chain.pem. Since the certificates issued by mkcert are installed to be recognized as certificates with root certificate authority signatures locally, mkcert does not need chain.pem information, but when applying it to the final operating server, there may be the troublesome task of changing the settings for the full chain.pem file. Let's copy the root ca.pem file from the path where the ca root certificate is located. I will match the file name of Let's Encrypt. I will create a full chain.pem file by combining cert.pem and chain.pem. A total of 4 PEM files were created. These are file names that are identical to the certificate files of Let's Encrypt. Git is a distributed version control system. Let's download the installation file for Windows. Double-click the downloaded installation file in File Explorer to launch the installation wizard. Let's proceed according to the instructions in the installation wizard. The default text editor is Vim Editor, but since Nano is currently installed, let's change it to Nano. Leave the remaining settings as default. Git command-related executable files are managed in the program files /git/cmd directory. Because I tried to include the entire web development environment in one video, the content became long, and I focused only on the installation. I will cover the actual development method in the established web development environment in detail in future videos. Thank you for watching.